and you need a time machine to get to 2021 or
1999.
or yeah. I mean, that would also be amazing. Yeah. But I mean, it's a very tough position to be in.
It's and the nerve on these guys to just do a reskin of.
But it's not a nerve. I mean, this is what I was talking about. The model, right? The model for these guys making a new game in Saudi Arabia is to just. I mean, I'm getting paid pretty good, and I want to do a creative thing.
They're
it's
not
more
getting
fun.
paid that good.
No, but I mean, probably better than if they all got laid off and had to go work at like
They'll figure it out
Skatteverket like
soon.
they had to. And
They'll know soon how that is.
But I mean, we had Scrum Masters leave King to go work at Skatteverket, and it's like they need tax authorities, whatever. They need Scrum Masters. They've got coders now and stuff. So those are options. But I mean, you can't. It's the wrong atmosphere to build something that's going to be a breakthrough.
Are we recording?
Yeah.
We can continue. David Nelson in the flesh.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to do a quick intro as well as I can. David Nelson from Malmö, Sweden, Sverige.
From the U.S.
People keep asking me, is he Swedish or American?
I'm zero.
And
Swedish.
I say he's confused.
I'm confused. Yes, I am without a country.
But you could be Swede.
I could.
You speak Swedish?
Yeah, I speak Swedish.
You have a Swedish name. You look really Scandinavian to me. I have a knack of knowing who looks Scandinavian. You got blue eyes. You're tall. You got a beard. Yep. You're a blonde. Yep. What am I missing? You look like a duck, walk like a duck, and you say you're not a duck.
So I lived in Europe when I was a kid, and we lived in Germany and in England from like 1980 to 1987. And my dad considers himself Norwegian. That's what he says he is. And
he identifies as
Norwegian. And one of my favorite, I love this, that he's like, one of my favorite things is this inter-Scandi, dislike of each other. Yeah. That Swedes and Danes and
I've heard about it.
Yes, it's so this is, and it passes down in generations. So when we went up to Copenhagen when I was like, 9, and then we drove quickly through Sweden to get to Norway.
There's a bridge?
No,
back then there wasn't.
No, there's bridge to Sweden, but then quickly up. Yeah, exactly. But we took a ferry. But just a fascinating, and then we got to Norway and he was like, I'm home. And I've always been like fascinated by people that are from other places and are like, oh, that's home. And I'm like, is it really? So home for me is, for me right now, it's this wonderful, not an apartment office thing. And
you don't have like a what do you call it, spiritual home or like a home country?
No.
But you're an American citizen, right?
American and Swedish citizen, yeah.
Yeah. You're like Philip Black.
I did it first. He's just cloning me.
Yeah, and Philip Black doesn't look Swedish at all.
No,
he doesn't have a Swedish name.
No. We'll work on it. We'll have to figure that out.
Philip Svarta.
Philip Svarta. Good word. You could do it. Do it.
Philip is listening to this. He's been waiting for this podcast the most. He gets a shout out now. Philip Svarta. Du kan göra det.
When I became a Swedish citizen, after 5 years in Sweden, I could become a Swedish citizen.
Yes.
So I went to Migrationsverket or whatever.
Yeah.
The immigration services. And they said, I'm there with my wife, and they said, you can become a Swedish citizen now. And I said, oh, what do I have to do? And they said, well, it's just some paperwork.
We'll just take a photo of you and you'll be one.
Yeah, it's just some paperwork and it costs 1,500 crowns. I said, I can give you 1,200. The woman was like, what? And I said, look, come on. You and me both. We know it's not worth, more than 1,000. But I'll meet you halfway. I can do 1,250. What do you think? And she was so appalled. My wife quickly grabbed the permanent residency card and ran off.
Yeah.
Anyway, but then inflation, and they met my price. Inflation happened. They didn't increase the price. So,
because Sweden has its own currency that floats.
It's really wonderful currency.
It's a shit currency, but good for export.
Good for exports. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, now they met my price, and so I finally did it. I think that was fair. Fair negotiation. Thank you.
More about you than that you becoming a Swede, even though looking like a Swede and talking Swedish, is and your father identifying as Norwegian, which is like, what's the difference? Oh, I don't know.
It's a big.
I know. I'm just
inflections
kidding.
Go up.
Just go kidding. The other one has bigger mountains. You worked at King.
Yes.
You've made your mark at King.
Yep.
You ran an experimentation group,
yep,
which was the one where you tested different things inside of the biggest franchise in mobile gaming. Is it? We could say it is. Candy Crush. If it's not the biggest, then at least in top 3.
Yeah, one of the biggest, yeah.
Top 3,
at
top 5.
At the time, it was definitely, it was huge. Yeah.
gigantic game. You got to do a lot of things. So I want to talk about the experimentation group that you run there, the experimentation group that you run outside of it. I want to talk about you being you inside of a company like King. So King, of course, evolved over time from what it was in the beginning, King.com, trying to find the product market fit, trying to find its success, to finding its success and finding way more success than they could have ever imagined, which led them to two massive changes. One is IPO, becoming a public company. Changes significantly how your company looks like from inside. And the second one is selling it to Activision Blizzard, which again changes significantly. So you are this Maverick that found itself suddenly in the corporation of the corporations.
Real corporate. You know what I mean, still vibrant because you're in a creative business, so you have to be vibrant.
But suddenly the rules have changed. And that's an interesting conversation. And then to finish on who's David Nelson. Since leaving King, when did you leave King? Like 2020?
End of 2021.
End of 2020. So not that late. You've started your own company with your experimentation friends. Making cool games that we're not going to talk about. And you have not talked about your company in any way ever. Anywhere. But the investors that have seen what you've done and the team that you've built are quite bullish. You have pretty awesome investors. You have Griffin Gaming Partners. Peter Levin was on the podcast in exact this studio. By the way, I was just in the other room because there's a producer, okay, over here. then in the other room, they were still talking about that Peter guy that came in that fucking crushed it.
It was a really entertaining one. It was a really good one.
So there's Peter. You got Goodwater Capital. So for people who don't know, Goodwater Capital, very big fund in the US, but most importantly, one of the partners and probably the partner involved in this one was Cody Johnson, previously COO of Activision, and probably that's your connection to that fund through King. And then Akeem from Triple Dot is also on your cap table. So those are excellent investors, and that means what you're doing is very interesting, and you're already at Series A. You've just raised recently a $10 million Series A. Congratulations. You're not in Malmo in some closet, thinking about the days when you were experimenting. You're actually building a company and experimenting a fuck ton at this moment.
Yes. True. Thanks I really like that you're putting the information out there. I even flinch as you do it.
Why?
I think it's an interesting...
Why do you want to talk about it?
No, it is an interesting, like part of me, the win... you guys have been talking about this a lot on the podcast. I think it's easy to be happy about things that's not the time to be happy, And so it's like, these are all good things, but they're only good things if we get everything to work. And so I stay focused on it, and I almost don't let any of the other information touch my ego. If I get a little proud, I'm like, dude.
I get it. There's two ways of thinking about this. Because the one is like you do, which I did before. And it's almost like self-flagellation in a way, where you don't ever stop to smell the roses or understand that you've crossed certain milestones. The other one is like where they think that the road ends at that racing. Of course, you don't want to be there. Like, we raised so much money, and then you post it everywhere, and sort of like that's the main thing. But it is an achievement and a token to what you're doing, and I think it is important to mention that you have gathered exceptional investors around the team that you've built and around the product that you're doing. And it's not that you just raised it with the team that you have. Since you crossed Series A, that means you have shown traction. You actually have built, probably in the market. You're testing different things, and the investors are looking at it saying, yes, we know David, we know his team, we know what he's done at King, which we're going to talk about. And what we're seeing now and the velocity that they've shown, the products they've built, warrants this investment and the previous investments, and that we're going to support what you're doing going forward in a tough market environment. It's a testament on what you're doing.
I'm really, Akeem and Cody and Phil, it's a great group of people that have been, that have supported us. And I think it's also really I think you can call it board dynamic, or investor dynamic. One of the things I really, really appreciate is we get good, honest feedback. We're straightforward with what we're trying to get done. And I mean, we're aligned on where we're going, why we're going there. And that means that we can be pretty vulnerable and open when we're not sure about something and we want to get feedback. We can get straight feedback on stuff. And that helps a lot. And I mean, I think that's just unbelievably valuable. I mean, I've seen a few other companies where the investors and the founding team maybe aren't quite aligned. And when you're not aligned, the amount of friction that it creates, it's just so much, you know? I mean, you have your own self-doubt and struggle with trying to make sure a product works and gets out there. And especially in a creative way. If you're making a SaaS thing, you're like, does this work for receipts or not? I'd have to concur.
Or Bitsala.
Least favorite product of all time. But I mean, if you're making a game, it's so much, the complexity level is so much higher, you know? So you really need to have a team that you trust where you can have clear feedback and you can sort of keep the truth always out there and keep challenging each other. And I think that's essential.
100%. And, you know, especially outside gaming and overall, when you bring in more and more investors, it's kind of hard sometimes to align them, even though it's fun to think about that you're building this RPG squad RPG team of 5-star characters, but the synergy between them might not quite be there.
Yeah,
which is, you know, when you put in a lot of different people with previous success and views and understanding, oftentimes it is there that they work really well together. But there are situations where they don't quite align and that becomes your board. So you have to be careful about that. But of course, you don't have that problem. But let's not talk about your cap table.
Yeah, let's move on to other things.
Yeah, we've had plenty of VCs on this podcast.
Cap tables are super exciting.
Yeah, we're done with that. Let's talk about Experimentation Group. Let's talk about your time on King.
Yeah.
Walk me through it. Like, where did it started? How did it evolve?
Yeah. I mean, I was working before. I mean, if you go back a little bit, I was a professional poker player. When I first moved to Sweden, I was working in a factory and then working night shifts. I wanted to make music. I was recording.
What type of a factory?
It made air filters in Trusa. I moved from Los Angeles to Trusa, which is like a little town south of Stockholm with like 4,000 people in it. It was amazing.
Make filters?
No, I was in love.
To a Swedish woman?
Yes.
That's not a rare
No,
occasion.
it happens. It happens. It happens.
That's one of their main way to import talent.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, it was a cool change. But then a friend of mine knew that I played gin rummy for money since I was like 8 because my grandmother was good at it. She taught me, so I've always been able to play cards for money. So poker was getting big, and I started.
Shout out to Grandma.
Grandma. She's a hell of a card player. So I started playing online poker and did that for a couple of years, and then got into poker. So I started working at BWin. And BWin at the time, I mean, a couple of things that were kind of interesting. Like if you start challenging stuff and challenging ideas, you find a lot of times things fall apart. Like there's a lot of reasonings inside of companies that are like sort of structured like, you know, it's like, we believe this and this and this and this, and you build this kind of house of cards. And then somebody just is like, wait, but what about this? And the whole thing goes to pieces. So it's an important role. It can be a risky role to play, but you know, it's an important role. So I did that at BWin for a while, and then I left and was at Full Tilt Poker as a country manager, and I did all sorts of strange things. I was in a startup that crashed, and a bunch of people had left BWin and gone to work at King, and they were like, you got to come here. This place is amazing. Yeah. So I interviewed at King, and I was like kind of unsure. I was like, I don't know this.
King.com?
I mean, it was the end of, I joined March 2013. So I was interviewing and talking to people at the end of 2012. And I remember it was like Candy hadn't really blown up. So, I mean, old joke was I was going to put on LinkedIn that my first month at King, you know, doubled the revenues, you know. I mean, but it was unbelievable to be there during that growth. I mean, I remember we were watching Serena Williams was at it was like French Open finals. And she tweeted at like 1:30 in the morning that she was stuck on level 253, you know. And you're like, dude, you have the finals tomorrow. Go to bed, you know. And, you know, she eventually passed level 253, which is the important thing.
It's the most important thing.
And then also won the French. She also won, of course. Yes, of course. But I mean, it was a crazy time to be there. Yeah. But like you said, then it sort of changed after a while. We IPO'd and it became like, you know, a different environment. And I felt like we weren't taking a lot of creative risks in the company. And so I challenged over and over again. And kept pushing against, like, you know, us doing relatively, you know, translating games for Japan or whatever. And I was like, that's what's going to do? It's going to do nothing. Let's start doing stuff. And I mean, it's hard to remember, but if you go back to like end of 2014, there was not a lot of live ops stuff going on inside of casual games. None of it really. You were just kind of like, that happened. You made a new one.
Content treadmill.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, so I got a hold of Steve Levitt, who wrote Freakonomics. and Daniel Kahneman, who wrote Thinking Fast and Slow, and they had a consultancy, and we had them come into King.
Was it worth the money?
I mean, without question, it was worth the money. I mean, we made hard level labeling right after that, which paid for it in spades. I mean, multiple times over. But also it changed the way we started thinking about stuff. And you started asking some deeper questions about the product and the game. So, I mean, the test that we ran with them and the paper we wrote didn't work. And it was really fun to watch an economist be like, how does this economy work? I don't understand, which is why game economists are different than Are
you saying that game economist is not really an economist?
There are some economists that can work with game economists, but I would be careful hiring a regular economist to,
I've seen that at so many companies, like not so many, but let's say certain US companies where they would bring in, like, we brought in a Stanford economist to help you with the game economy for your upcoming game. And you're like, what?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on what the person's, experience is and how they think of things
had
and
no
what
idea
they've
of
done. But
games.
if they haven't, it's a real...
Nor like maybe the interest either.
Yeah.
They like the check.
I mean, there's a guy, and I think he's still at Activision. He's amazing, Christopher. But he was hired as a game economist. And the way they hired him was that they found out that he was doing economy modeling for buying parts for helicopters. And they were like, maybe that'll be useful for Call of Duty. And that's how they got, that was like he does that in real life. He can probably do this. The thing is, he's incredibly smart, and he just dug in and started trying to figure out how things worked. And I think that's probably an important part. That's probably part of what led us to experimentation is you start asking, like, wait, why does this work? What is it that works? Can we take something out? If we take this out, does the whole thing break? Or does it not break?
Yeah.
What matters?
So basically you just challenge every truth that the company had. Yeah,
challenge them. And some stand and some have to stand for some reason. But it's really good, I think, to ask yourself what happens. The consulting group with Tom Storr and Phil Black, we were working with
Phil Svarta.
Yeah, Phil Svarta. We were working. There was a group they were talking. We're talking to this team, and they were so convinced of something that this was really important. We need to fix our retention, but whatever. And we're like, well, why don't you just remove the whole meta thing you guys have? Because I'm not sure that's working. And they were like, we just spent like a year and a half on it. We can't remove it. And I was like, is that really a reason not to remove it?
Do you whisper when you challenge them?
I'm just trying to keep this intimate.
Yeah. But do you really
These
whisper?
microphones are so good.
Yeah, I know.
If I have to, I'm ready to use any.
Because when you whispered, I was like, yeah, maybe he's right.
Yeah, I should use that more. All right, no taken. But it was removed, and the answer was like no change in retention. And you're like, oh shit. And you're like,
and you do that through A/B tests.
Yeah, it's just an A/B test. But one of the, and this is, I hope, something that we get to, because you've been quite forward with like fast fail and the MVP doesn't work. And I think that there's some nuance in there.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the A/B testing and experimentation goes on in early games is very minor. Like changing buttons or changing stuff. They're not taking their true beliefs, cutting it out, and then finding out, was I right?
You're absolutely. So let me follow on that point.
This podcast is brought to you by AppsFlyer. In today's digital world, understanding your app's journey from discovery to download is more than just insightful, it's essential. Enter AppsFlyer, the leader in mobile attribution and marketing analytics that allows you to measure the full potential of your marketing efforts, making every ad dollar work smarter. With AppsFlyer, that's your new reality. Dive deep into data-driven insights that reveal exactly where your users come from and how they'll interact with your app. AppsFlyer, where your app's potential meets performance.
So companies, we're not quite game economist level.
No, we're not.
I'm just kidding. But we do work with some of the big companies. Anyway, so when we talk to their teams, and they're like, okay, so we take the game and we talk first with the Park team, and he's like, we've done a lot of A/B tests, and I'll be honest, we haven't seen really like a result that would have changed the trajectory of the game. Like this is, of course, going through the symptoms before the actual work occurs, and that's true. But the type of a test that they do are really small. Like we're going to do this pop up here, pop up there, and then we might see a small incremental there and this one there, and then we merge these together to the actual main branch, and it doesn't really affect in the end. But What you're talking about is making the big changes. And that's where I've personally seen the test really work, because this sort of a A/B testing, I think it's not the right way to do. Like when I talk to some of the casino companies, for example, some of the live optimization, like top of the notch platforms, like let's say Medica, they focus on personalization, where there's not like the right A or B for how do you do offers. There's different variations based on how the players are playing.
Yeah.
And you should, and it's not like you do 7 tests and then the one is better than the rest of the 6, and then you merge everybody to the one. But the thing is, now it's for the wider audience, and that one is actually not so good for so many different demographics, and there's actually multiple variants. But the ones where I've seen it work really well, A/B tests, like the best A/B test that I've ever ran was we had a combat game called Army Attack, and we had Fog of War, and a free-to-play game. And I was like, and we had the debate for a long time. Fog of War, no Fog of War. And there was a hypothesis that if you have Fog of War, it feels more like an RTS. It's what's expected in this genre, and it was given that it will be there. And I was like, but if you don't have a Fog of War, then you see further ahead, and then that stays in your head because you're not kind of finished.
You can feel goals.
But you feel goals. Exactly. And then it was like back and forth. Let's run an A/B test. And that was the only A/B test where considerable increase in retention, and when it was merged back to the main track, it increased retention tangibly. But that's the only one where I've seen a true change take place, because it was a big change to the actual core gameplay.
I mean, there's a I think there's a really, so that was a guy I worked with, King, named Alvaro. He kind of got me to go to an MIT, like some sort of, innovation course. And I'm, as we've already discussed, I'm like, meh, and I'm kind of hardcore, and I don't go to these fancy things. So I went anyway, and because he's convincing. And one of the things that really stuck with me from it was one of the professors talked about, like, sometimes companies buy a bunch of fishing gear, they get back to their truck, and they get out of the truck in the parking lot, and they start fishing. And they didn't go to the place where the fish are. And they're just fishing there, but they got all the gear and they're excited. And that's what this A/B testing thing feels like to me. It's like, they're like, we're going to A/B test. And you're like, okay, cool. What are you going to A/B test? And they're like, buttons and these kind of things. And you're like, but that's not the fish you're hunting. You're trying to fix it. You're trying to make a hit, but you don't want to put your own like heart on the line. So you kind of shy away from it. Hey man, if you're operating a game that has like 1 million DAO and you want to have different cases and optimize, there's all sorts of money there. There's a ton of ways to do that effectively, and you should totally do it. But if you're trying to figure out how can I make a major shift in the game, you got to put something on the line. You got to ante up. You got to put one of your deep beliefs that you think really matters on the line and find out if it does. And I think if you do that on a regular basis, you get this wonderful compound interest effect. Your insights start building on each other. But if you're not putting something on the line that matters, you're not investing. You're not actually putting anything in. But like, when we ran experimentation, the experimentation group we ran for years, over and over again, we ran tests in the smaller games at King that mattered. And those, when you do that, the teams start to be able to take in like deeper learnings, things that really matter in these games, and they start to build a deeper understanding of what players really care about. And you get compound interest on those things. You make better and better decisions. You can take better and better chances, I mean, I think that's the role of it. I mean, for any team out there working on something, try to figure out what would you be afraid of A/B testing? What would be terrifying for you? Maybe you should test it, And you don't need to A/B test. You could also just, if you're a team that's making something, I mean, if you're making a PC game or something like that, and you don't have an actual audience or good way to test, you can still build it, bring 20 of your friends over, give 10 of them one, 10 of them the other, and find out what happens to their, like, what do they think of the different experiences? So I think there's ways to test it beyond just the sort of like, I must have a 10,000 people, other p-value is not.
Exactly.
I mean, you can put the difficult thing into a build quickly, and put it in front of your team, even
like a taste test.
And just like, holy shit, this,
this chocolate bar or that chocolate bar.
And you get a gut feel reaction, and that's what you're trying to build on. And as you get that, you start to build better understanding, I think.
So talk to me how this experimentation group got started.
Yeah, I mean, we started out with, I was challenging stuff, and then the leadership offered us 3 games to work with. So we started working with 3 games.
What was the pitch?
I think the official first version of the pitch was, why are you doing this in like a big meeting? Why are you doing this? None of this shit matters. And then he said, well, what should we be doing then, David? And I said, literally anything else would be better than this. And then somebody...
This is an internal meeting with King.
Yeah, it was a leadership meeting. And then...
Quite confrontational.
But,
sounds like personal.
Nobody's ever called me confrontational before. I am highly... There's another fun Swedish thing after living in Sweden for 20 years. So Swedes are konflikträdd.
Yes, we know. They like meetings.
Scared.
And
yeah. Yes. And
the whole consensus-driven culture.
You know, the good COVID joke, like, you know, now that COVID is over, they can stop being 2 meters away from each other and go back to being 4 meters away from each other. You know, it's fun. Anyway, so I remember...
they make that about Finns.
Yes. I mean, well...
They increased it to 5, though. Yeah. Anyways.
But the... somebody once pointed out that I was probably not konflikträdd, conflict scared, but I was konfliktintresserad. I was conflict interested.
Yes.
And I think also, like, I mean, for me, conflict or like, you know, I mean, challenging things is a way to get to interesting outcomes and interesting understandings. I think for me, it's a standard way of operating. I've done it for my whole life. But I try to include with it also a high level of empathy. Like it's never personal. Like, I mean, I don't have everybody in their life is working hard to try to make it meaningful for them.
Yeah.
And no opinion that I should change that. And I've got nothing for respect for how people lead their lives.
Yeah.
I might disagree with your idea though. And I'll be clear on it.
But so this is an important point. Like this sort of being konfliktintresserad is a conflict interested person is, or let's put it this way. Meetings with conflict are really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're engaging. Yeah. There's ideas that are conflicting each other.
Yeah.
There can be made different decisions. Meetings without a conflict are worthless.
Yeah. Yeah. They're emails.
They're reporting.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I mean, as long as the conflict is on ideas or even principles or like operating plans that you want to challenge.
You said management
let's
meeting.
Do it.
Management meeting without a conflict is scary.
Yeah.
Like what? Everybody thinks we're doing the right things in the right order and everything is perfect?
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be like the worst management meeting ever.
Yeah. I mean, it's and that is, I think there's a forum for that. I mean, and you can credit the King leadership that I was allowed to challenge them often on these kind of things.
Did that change over time as the company evolved?
I mean,
because people tie conflict to negative emotions, which is, I understand, conflict zones, conflict, conflict of interest. Like it is a negative term, but the way just we're describing it as you're having a management meeting, which is either tactical or strategic, not reporting. And this is not like your daily stand-up where people argue.
Yeah.
This is a meeting that is designed to talk about topics.
Yeah.
And if everybody fully agrees with what the company is doing at this moment in this way, and David's doing this, I'm going to give him space. He can do it anything. I'm going to do this. Nobody can challenge me. Nobody will challenge me because the culture not to challenge each other, that leads to disaster.
Yeah, I mean, at least a lot of passiveness, which
down the line, because nothing gets challenged and everything is correct until it's not.
Yeah, and at times I think it's okay for a corporation to like have things be passive. I mean, we can avoid big political discussions on politics in the West currently, but there's a lot of 50-50 left and right going on. And I think there's just a general feeling that we don't really want a lot of things. We don't really want a strong leader. I mean, as a culture, we kind of like split and it's like, meh. And maybe there isn't really clear what the path forward is. Yeah. And I think it's like that sometimes in organizations.
Yeah.
If we're not clear what the path forward is, it's often easier just to kind of get locked and stay passive.
Yeah.
And what you need to be able to do is you need some people that can challenge in places where there needs to be some safety for it. I mean, I know that I've challenged in places where there wasn't enough psychological safety, and I shouldn't have, and I probably should have done it, in smaller settings or off to the side first. But I mean, you need somebody to challenge these things and start to build understanding again of ways out of these passive situations.
Yeah,
and that's a really hard thing to do.
Well, I try to personally and. To create conflict in meetings.
Yeah.
And it's really easy without you being the aggressor. Because you could say, somebody's presenting something, I'd say, Dave, what do you think about this?
Yeah, exactly.
Because I know that I would see that you see through certain emotions, either it's total disinterest, which is good to bring that person back to the conversation. Hey, you're steering away. What do you think about this? Just to keep them engaged, good way. or you see that the person is kind of skirmishing on their, like they got something to say, but they're not doing, and be like, what do you think? And that starts creating the conflict, which is good, because then if you're the manager, if you're leading that meeting, you're not creating, like you are creating conflict, but you're not part of it. Now you can sit back and really see different perspectives that help you to make the decisions from that. So conflict is good.
Yes. I mean, this is one of the, Daniel Kahneman, one of the methods, he said, if you really want to know what a group wants to, like, thinks, you can't ask them, because somebody will speak and then it'll get like moved along like that. So ask everyone to write down what they think and then read them one by one. And I still think that's one of the methods. I don't know why it's not used more often. Just like everybody write down what it is. Like if the question is like, is this on the right track or whatever? What are your reflections on these next things we're building? What do you think really matters? And you ask a group of just like 8 people, it's crazy how varied answers you get. And but if you ask it verbally, you get maybe 2.
Yeah. Good one. Good one. It can create, that's a good way to force conflict as well.
Yeah, exactly. Because after that, you can do like what you were talking about. I mean, we started doing this early on in King in some scenarios, early on, but when I was working there, and I found what happened often was there'd be a group of us, and a few of us spoke well, and we would sort of take over the conversation, and it would go around whatever things we thought were interesting.
Yeah, that's true.
And you wouldn't find out till like months later that somebody else had this completely different point of view that you didn't bring into the conversation because they didn't bring it up and they weren't ready to bring it up.
And because the person leading the meeting did not bring it forward.
Yeah. And you just move to write and read, and all of a sudden you get this very rich feedback from a group of people about what matters to them and what they see.
Fantastic.
That's very good.
Kick-ass live ops need kick-ass tools. That's where Heroic Labs comes in. They just released a massive update to their Satori live ops platform. And having done my research, I can say with confidence that it's second to none. In a single product, you get everything you need, including event capture, player segmentation, feature flags, remote configuration, A/B testing, experimentation, live events calendar, messaging, retention graphing, analytics, and so much more. If you're serious about running live services in a game, get serious about the tools you use. Connect with Heroic Labs and make some serious cheese with your live ops.
Let's get back to Experimentation Group. Yeah. So there was a meeting where you were conflict interested, and you challenged something, and they said, well, since you know the best, what do you think we should do?
Yeah, I mean, there was eventually an agreement that with the 3 of the teams, one of the teams was in Bucharest and 2 of them were in Barcelona, and that we would go work with them and work on ideas to bring them from the small games into Candy Crush. And at the time, I mean, the pitch was quite simple. It was like, hey, we're taking all of our risk in our big games.
The crown jewel.
Yeah. And meanwhile, the small games are doing whatever works in the big game. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense because you can't get as much done and you can't take as much risk. And they are worth much less once they go down to the small games. So why don't we have the small games doing all the riskier things? And there was conflict too. I mean, some people in the team didn't think it was a good idea. There was questions about, it's always fascinating to me. There was questions of like, they were like, there's no way something that works in this game is going to work in Candy. And I was like, but the thing that works in Candy works in the smaller game. And they were like, yeah. And you're like,
did you whisper that too?
Yes. I was so confused.
I feel like when you want to get emotional, you go to the whisper and like, you really think that's the right thing?
Is it the right thing? I need one of these mics in all of my interactions. It brings this like, it's very intimate.
Do you really think that's the right side?
I don't think I've ever whispered. I'm always just way too loud. Actually, it's just you.
I love it.
I love it. This is going to be a way to manage me now. Put me on a headphone and turn up my volume. And I'll whisper all the time. But this was like it was a big deal. People didn't really believe in it. So we ran this we started running these tests and they started working. And then I think the fun part was when they started working, pretty quickly we got a call from after hard level even worked, the CEO of the company called and he was like,
what's his name?
Stefan.
Yes. I heard Stefan was the strict.
Yes, he was the strict one.
From VC background.
Yes.
And then
Stefan,
yeah.
And
he was great counterpart because King leadership is like 3 people back in the days. You got Ricardo, who is, in my experience, like I thought I met like many of executives, founders, successful people are like 10 out of 10 nice, like really, really pleasant to interact. And, the Il Capones of the world, they're 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
And then I met Ricardo, and I understood that there's 11.
There's an 11, yes. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
He makes the whole room feel great.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah, he's high energy. And I mean, I still think he's got like views on a lot of his gut feeling of what matters, I think are on. Like, I mean, he's got a very strong vision of what matters to players.
Yeah.
And what he thinks is going to happen.
And
he did that.
And then King Leadership. So you got that. Then you got the I don't mean a diminishing number, but more like a bean counter type of a person.
Well, you mean Stefan? I'd say was
numbers.
No, but he wasn't. I don't think it's that.
No?
It's more of an operator. Stefan is an operator.
Yeah, that's what I kind of meant. Like,
but I mean,
prime minister.
But I mean, not even just like, it's not just numbers. It's like, what is the direction that we're going in? How are we structuring this? And like, it's really very like, making sure the battle plan makes sense.
And the third person is the creative director.
And Seb, yeah.
Seb, and that creates, as a single leader, they might be great. But when you bring in three very distinctive, like visionary, culture setting person, then you have a very operating focused person, and then you have a very creative person. That sounds like a powerful trio.
Yeah. And I mean, when I also think I was lucky when I came in 2013. It was still in a time when everything was very dynamic in the company. And I mean, after you go public and then you get bought by Activision Blizzard, some different dynamics happen. And I mean, I still think it was a very dynamic company, but it's, I mean, and I was also lucky to start in the Stockholm office. So I sat close, I mean, got teased by the founders, and like I could be close enough to, watch when like the Ekevalds and the Losjanovs and were arguing and discussing things. And, I mean, it was fun. Me and a guy named Marcus Leovold were hired like, 1 week apart to do exactly the same thing. We were both told like, you need to make candy work in Asia. And, we showed up, I think we kind of have the same job, but that's what it was like.
Yeah.
They were just hiring. There was new things going on
all the time.
So we just worked out how to work together, removed ego and figured out how to partner on it and get the game onto Kakao Talks. I mean, it was a very vibrant, open company. And then I moved from Stockholm to Malmö, and Malmö was like, it's very different because it was it was not a satellite, but it's owned by, it's not the headquarters.
Yeah, it's technically a different country.
And they're like, what? Yeah, yes. And they're like, what does Stockholm think? And I was like, what do we think? But you find that there's these dynamics in companies where in the headquarters you can behave one way, and outside the headquarters you behave a different way. And it was a fun experience for me to see all these different sides. How was Barcelona run compared to Malmö was run, to Berlin, to London and Stockholm, and they were all very different. So you got to see like they were different kings inside.
Of course.
I mean, even in 2020,
different cultures as well.
You still have like the old 2012 king is still there somewhere, in places, So it's a very.
Sorry, I got to put you on a sidetrack with. You said you were with Stefan.
I can do the quick. Yeah. So I mean, we started working with these 3 games, started partnering with those teams, and we started a framework. And the framework was very simple. It was like, we need to run tests that they need to be high impact. So you can imagine a little chart, as high impact as possible and as generalizable as possible. So if you're working on like a solitaire game and the thing is something about how the game works, like the cards flip, it's only going to work for the solitaire game. It's not that generalizable. So what we said to the teams when we first pitched it was, this needs to be like really affect players understanding the game or the way they relate to it. And then it needs to be something that if Twitter found out about it, they'd be like, whoa, that's interesting. So how general can you make it? And I mean, that's exaggerating, of course, because but
Twitter didn't care about it. No, they didn't improve their app in like 10 years.
We did. I went to Twitter in September 2013 because I'd had an idea that I wanted to pitch that we would use Twitter instead of Facebook. And that, because remember back then you had to ask friends to open up new content. There was these collab logs.
Yes, I remember. Yeah.
And eventually
one friend, bringing 5 friends, bringing 10 like virality hooks.
Yeah. But it was used basically, you always had to pay $1 or like get 3 friends to unlock you, which calls all these Facebook things. And I was like, why don't we do it through Twitter? And then why don't we do it like so that like if you're Serena Williams or you're Tom Cruise, you have to get like 50,000 people to help you. And I was like, because they don't have anything to talk about on Twitter anyway. Then they'd have at least something to talk about. And like, oh, you're playing Candy Crush, you're like me, maybe it'd be nice.
That's not a bad idea.
I mean, this is 2013, right? So,
but still, it's not a bad idea. Like using, this is essentially influencer strategy.
Yes. So I went to Twitter and pitched it. And they were like, well, you're like hacking our thing. And I was like, yeah, it would be cool for both of us. Why don't we do it? And they were like, sure. But then it ended up we had different priorities. We did different stuff inside the company, so we didn't do it. But at the time, I was really fired up about it.
In San Francisco, you went there.
Yeah, I went, met them and went to the office. And like, it's kind of cool. Anyway, so we did this. So we set up this thing and the team started getting results. And as the feature started working, they transferred into Candy Crush. And like after a little while, we were asked, like, how can you do this? Like, okay, cool. You did it once. The first call was like, this worked. That's great. When is the next one? And I was like, dude, this is like creative destruction and you never know. And I don't know. A quarter later, we had another one. And they were like, I got a phone call. It was just like, hi. Once a quarter then. And I was like, no, wait. Deep. And I mean,
who was the caller?
Stefan.
Stefan.
Yeah. But I mean, in some ways, I think this is probably to me the crux of the interesting, how do you do creative work in an industry like ours? It's so incredibly analytical because you can't let the analytics eat it. You can't be like, I have to do one. If I have to do one a quarter, that's fine. I'll just do 1% uplifts. I can figure that out, But that's not what we want. Bigger ones. Like we want big impact. So how do you get big impact but be predictable? Well, by making sure that you've got enough throughput and to make sure that you have a system where the ideas that are coming, you get broad. We took ideas from the entire company. So anybody could put in ideas. I remember one of my favorite.
But how did you get that? Like this was my next question to get deeper into the ideation, because now you're in a time frame, so you have to be creative inside of a time box to create high impact and generalizable outcomes. Yeah. How do you get the company to pitch in? Like, what do you do? Because we opened up an intranet, this thing where you can submit what you want to do. Yeah. But that seems like a low-hanging fruit. Like, I'm sure you had to do some legworks to get the real ideas, because people are just like, where is this going?
But you share. So you share. You tell people when an idea comes out, you tell them it comes from other people. The ideas could come from anybody.
Got it. So excellent.
And then once a week or twice a week, I forget what the frequency was, we had a meeting where anybody that put in ideas comes and presents and talks about what they think, and we get feedback and discuss it. So if it doesn't go forward into the hot list that we had, the list of things to experiment on. And I mean, this is actually, quite detailed. So anybody can put something in. They meet with the group and we evaluate it. It's still up to us to make sure that the quality of the ideas that are coming in are good. So we need to make decisions. That's not outsourced, because if it's outsourced, then there's no responsibility. Then you're taking in everything. So it's still us. And then a hot list goes to the teams, and the teams take off the hot list. So you don't tell a team, you have to do A and you have to do B and you have to do C, because they might not have any creative. You might look at idea A and be like, I don't know how to do it. Yeah. So you need to have a list of maybe 7, 8, 10 things so I can grab one. And sometimes a really challenging one stays at the top of the list for a long time and nobody takes it. And then you have to say to a team, can one of you guys, this time one of you has to do it.
You have to whisper to them?
You got to take it. Come on. Just
take the hard one.
But I mean, it's a challenge. And I mean, there you have a framework, a way to connect to people and giving them credit for their ideas, and like actual ownership on who makes decisions, but room for creativity.
Love it.
You have to have room for creativity, otherwise it doesn't work.
You became the mediator of ideas.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I mean, it was
because you're in the middle.
Yeah, you're in the middle. Yeah,
you pull from everybody. Yeah, you trim it down. Yeah. And you give the ownership what to execute on to the team. So that becomes your mediator of ideas. It was an
incredible privileged position, because we saw a ton of input of ideas and we saw all the outcomes, and you could absorb it.
Talk to me some of the examples. What are you like specifically proud of, what the experimentation group was able to achieve in addition to conflict?
I mean, I think there's a ton of stuff. I mean, of course, like hard level labeling is a big thing. I mean,
hard level labeling, meaning when I start a level, before the level, it says, hey, son, it's going to be hard. So get your power-ups ready.
Yeah, and people didn't want to do it. They thought it was going to make people unhappy. So we thought, and I mean, we just labeled levels that were hard. I mean, it's not a big deal. Yeah. But like, people thought that people would be unhappy and pissed off. And then we saw a review on the App Store.
Those are emotions.
We saw a review on the App Store that said, I'm laying in bed next to my husband, and he has hard levels, but I don't, and that's not fair. What's going on with this game? And you're like, so you want them?
Yeah.
Because you had to, so it became like a goal for people to get to them.
But what's bad about, something being hard or, difficult?
I don't know.
That doesn't make
they'd be intimidated
But it's good to have an array of motion in your game.
Yeah, of course. I mean, but
not everything has to be sweet.
The thing that's The thing that's hard with game making is the ideas that you're sure of, right? You're sure of them until you aren't sure of them. Yeah. And I mean, and we go back to that first thing. You got to put these things on the line sometimes, and you got to ask yourself, is this thing matter or not? And my favorite tests were always the ones where we were like, is this how bad is this gonna break things?
Step into the future of game monetization with Exola, the premier partner for game developers seeking to expand their reach and revenue. Exola provides a robust suite of tools designed to enhance user acquisition, manage subscriptions, and streamline payment solutions worldwide. Unlock new markets and maximize profitability through their customized, secure payment architecture and dedicated support team. Exola, powering game developers to achieve global success.
Tell me about the technicality, not the technicalities, but how would you run these tests, like in practice?
It's like 50-50 A/B tests.
Oh, 50 right away, 50-50. Yes. And
there's probably some tech thing to make sure.
How big were the games in terms of
I don't know.
DAU?
It was millions back then.
Millions.
It was. We're incredibly lucky position we were in.
What was that? Pearl Saga or something?
No,
I forgot.
There's Scrubby Dubby.
King had some weird ass games.
Scrubby Dubby.
Yeah, Scrubby Dubby, and like something. It had the cat game.
Oh, the cat game. So I can't talk about the cat game without getting emotional because it was Shuffle Cats. And it was a gin rummy game. And I was like, get rid of the cat. Gin rummy. People that play gin rummy like gin rummy.
Yeah.
I don't want your cat in my gin rummy game.
Why not? Cats. Everybody likes cats.
No, that's what the argument was. That's literally what the argument was.
There was the experimentation group on that? Did you try with dogs?
When it eventually came in.
Did you try with dogs?
When it eventually came into, when Shuffle Cats eventually came in, a guy named Mathieu took out the cats. And if I remember correctly, it did better without the cats. But at that point, it was too late.
Yeah, because the name of the game was Shuffle Cats.
But it was better without the cats.
Yeah, you're kind of, because like...
But I'm not. Don't hold me to that. Asterisks on that data point. I'm not so sure. But I'd say that a lot of the interesting things that the tests that were being done at that time, and you can see them in a lot of the games now. People have absorbed what we did at that time, and it's just integrated in games now.
Yeah.
I think, the whole tying to progression and like making sure the progression really matters and understanding short-term goals and medium-term goals, all that stuff really matters.
So experimentation group, how did you lead it? Because was it you? Were you the whole group, or did the group grow?
No, it was me and a guy named Marcus and a guy named Marco and a woman named Alex Vo. And Alex worked originally with Steve Levitt and Daniel Kahneman. So she worked with them and she came over as a consultant, and then she joined King and joined us. And then there were more people. We had a bunch of, we had a pretty reasonable sized team. Tom worked with us. Mm-hmm. Niklas, we had a bunch of different people come in and, sometimes people came in for a while, worked with us and then left, did other stuff. But we basically kept a pretty lean team. Made some mistakes a couple times in trying to run some different experiments inside the experimentation group, but mostly we just worked with the leadership of the game teams to make sure that we were. And
so as you're doing this, so it's between 2014 and 2021, or
I'd say it started 2015, and then it was 2019. It shifted a bit, so I was running it with somebody else, and I started taking some other responsibilities. In my last time at King, I was working with. London, Berlin, and Malmö. So we had Pet Rescue, Bubble Witch, Candy Crush Friends, Candy Crush Jelly, and Farm Heroes. Mm-hmm. And those were the games.
And as you were running these tests, so you're growing this group. Stefan is happy with you. Every quarter, you're bringing in new results.
Yep.
From the test from the experiments that you're running.
Yep.
Things are going smoothly, but the company is transforming around you. Yeah. So it goes from King.com. To King.
Yeah, IPO'd King. Yeah.
To the IPO King, to Midas Touch.
Yeah.
I might have had some contracts with King.
Yes, exactly. You remember the actual name of the company. Exactly. Yes.
Anyways, and you move from the company moves from from a private company on web to mobile company to IPO to actually acquiring a mid-core publisher, Z2.
Yeah.
I remember that one.
Yeah.
To kind of like expanding to different genres.
Yeah.
And then getting acquired by Activision Blizzard.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you're in experimentation mode. Tell me how the company changing and growing around you affected your work.
I mean, I'd say one of the things that happens, which is, if we talk about being conflict oriented or whatever, if you're in a group where people know you and they know your intentions and they've been around you a bunch, you can challenge things and be pretty straightforward and everybody kind of understands. But as a company starts to get bigger, and it's unfair to call it like politicized, but it becomes hard. You don't have as many like organic relationships. The relationships aren't like built with like, there's not as much depth. So you might know this person, but sat in meetings with them, but you haven't really like been through any, you might have called it like, there's no storming and forming. I think I've heard you say that before a couple of times, but there isn't like a real, like a relationship that has some resilience. What happens then is if you keep behaving in the way that you always have, and for me, I think one of the things that a weakness of mine was I thought that's how I show respect. I mean,
to being yourself.
Yeah, not just be myself, but if I challenge your ideas, that means I think they're worth challenging.
Yeah.
I think they're worth. If somebody just gives me an idea that's not particularly interesting, then I've got nothing to say. Like for me, challenging it and pushing back is a interest in understanding the world, and
you're giving the other person a chance to change your perspective.
Yeah, yes. I mean,
I'm willing to change my perspective. Yeah. Prove me wrong.
Let's do it. Let's talk about it.
Let's mental joust.
Yes. But if you're, the problem is if you're, you can talk about like, aren't we supposed to all men be thinking about ancient Rome or something? Shouldn't we bring up ancient Rome at some point? I thought that was.
Do we
is
now?
that required? I thought I would just throw it in, and then we've done that. We can check it off.
What do you want me to whisper?
Yeah,
Colossus.
Claudius.
So Maximus.
No, but it's very when it's growing.
Yeah.
Then like heroes are coming back to Rome, and like everybody knows that expanding Rome is great, and that's it. But then when it sets,
when it reaches maturity, and suddenly growth of revenue is not there, but the EBITDA becomes more important.
Yeah. What happens then? And now also what property you sit on matters, because we're no longer adding new properties. But what property you sit on matters. So the game changes somewhat, and I think that. I'm probably built more as an early Roman than I am as a late Roman.
The Republican.
Yeah.
What was it, Republic?
It was a Republic up until
SPQR.
Yeah. Yes, SPQR. Excellent. And that is I think that's something that should be aware. Especially if you're a sort of Maverick-oriented, challenge-oriented person, you need to make sure that you're doing it in the right rooms, because at some point it's changed. And it becomes like the relationships aren't quite as resilient, and what things look like in meetings matter more, and you need to pay attention to those things.
And so the company grows, you get more people on your team, but you're still Dave Nelson. You're still there with your Carhartt jacket, just challenging everybody and being conflict intresserad.
Yes.
But nevertheless, the people are joining a corporation. They expect the sort of a certain King Activision values to be there, and maybe conflict is not one of them.
Yeah.
Maybe hugging is more important, and being like.
Yeah, or like formally professional. Like people are like, they'd like to have a, like a.
Oh yeah, because you're bringing.
So talk about this structure, and I'm like, wait, but what at point 3? And they're like, point 3? Like we just. Can I do point 1 and 2? And I'm like, if you have to. Yeah. But it becomes different. And this was different. The culture that was existing in 2013 and 14. We could sit down at a meeting, and one of the leaders, like Stefan, we could have a deck of like 80 pages, and he could be like, slide 37, chart on the left. Is that Android US? What is that? And you'd be like, yeah, it's Android US. Okay, great. Thanks. Start again. But you had to know your shit, So we were used to that. There was some of us that were used to this very in-depth, like you knew your stuff and you knew your numbers, and you didn't like, to come into something where it's more like, okay, let's talk about high level. We're coming together, and maybe there's some maybe we're taking corporate decisions on like a high strategy level, and now we're just going to implement them in King, and they don't need to be questioned and challenged. So, I think in part it's, I could have read that earlier, but also I hope I brought some value by still questioning stuff. And I hope for the most part, people felt like the interactions gave something.
Well, you were certainly a maverick inside of an organization, right?
Yeah.
You could say that.
Yeah. Yes. That was hired for. When I first started, Lars Jonov literally was like, on my introduction slide, it was like, he's a maverick and he's here to like rattle things. That was like how he hired me.
Was there an image of Top Gun?
No, No, there should have been.
That
would.
yes.
I don't know how. Maybe it was too on the nose or something. I should have brought in glasses.
We like it on the nose.
Yes.
You should have come with a leather jacket, with a bomber jacket. But okay, so you get brought in as a Maverick, and you come in an earlier enough stage where you can create a lot of trust and air cover. Let's start.
Air cover. Yes.
Let's keep using the Air Force terms.
Yeah.
So air cover in the sense of there are executives who know you, who trust you. That when somebody comes in like, this David Nelson is causing a lot of ruckus over there. It's like, no, he's Dave. Like don't worry about it. Versus somebody who's just joined the company and causing a lot of ruckus, then that person would be at a not a pleasant conversation afterwards.
Yeah, but I mean, you also challenged things. I mean, in order no, but I mean, even in any scenario, whether it's in a company or anywhere, you need to have some. There needs to be some resilience in the relationship. The higher the resilience in the relationship, the better you can challenge somebody. Yeah. I mean, even in just normal friendships, if you've got a good friend and you ask them like, dude, why are you doing these things? Like, is this really the way you want to live or whatever? If you don't know the person well, they're like, what are you doing?
Fuck are you?
What's wrong with you? But if it's a person you've known for a while and you know that they have your best interest at heart, you can challenge. I think that's like what happens in a company. Like, I mean, if people know, and if you've got the relationships, so they know that you have the company's best interest at heart, then you can challenge harder and more clearly. I mean, as long as it is with good intentions.
Yeah.
But if you don't have them, it becomes a lot harder. And I think some people, I mean, I've seen people come into organizations and with a challenging, and I know the intention's right, but other people can't quite see it yet, you know? And you see people just move back away from them. And they kind of get stuck in.
It really depends on leadership. It really depends on your relationship with the executives. Without even calling out, I would never want to call out anybody publicly, but I've seen executives come in and heard of C-suiters even come in and do the right things, challenge on the right things, and then just not having a career basically after that because they haven't built perhaps the social capital.
Yeah.
Is that a good word? Yeah. They haven't built the social capital inside the company to spend it on these challenges because these challenges do spend it.
Yeah, exactly. You're
going against others, and though you're saying no, it's my good intent to challenge everything that you're doing with your product. For them, it's no. You're challenging my work.
Yes, exactly. Yes,
you're challenging my ability to manage my product.
Yeah,
that's a bold challenge to do.
Yeah,
especially when you come in and say, "Hey, that year and a half that you spent on building that meta, useless."
Yeah. I mean,
and you're like, "That's a win for the experimentation group." It is not a win for the meta product.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is at Magnetic. It's interesting because a lot of the founding group are highly like we're ready to challenge each other, and we challenge each other on a regular basis. But I remember, this is interesting. Maybe like a side note. I remember Marco, one of the co-founders at Magnetic, and who worked with me from the very beginning in Experimentation.
Magnetic is your company.
Yes, Magnetic's the games company. He, I remember at one point I was like, I would basically challenge like everything in some meetings, and I'd kind of gone like overboard with it. Like I'd challenge this and I'd challenge that and I'd challenge that. And he'd say something and I'd challenge him on it. And afterwards he was like, hey, he's like, man, I know it's your like vibe and it's your thing, but sometimes you challenging me and Marcus and the other people in our team in front of the team, they just see disunity. They don't see like interest. They don't see the culture you think, because all they see is a meeting that's gone off the rails for them. And so I did start like dialing back the open challenging in more open meetings and realizing for them, they just need to get back to work and figure out what to do on the game to make the game better. They don't need to see they need a little more unity.
They want united front.
Yeah. Or they just want to know what to do next.
Of course.
Could you help us figure out what to do next? And I think that it's interesting starting Magnetic because we've also like knowing that the group needs to know, the team needs to know that, hey, we're making something, we want it to be extremely popular, which means everything's on the table. If you want to challenge something, you should challenge it, right? But you make sure that you're challenging things that are essential, not challenging for challenging's sake, but like challenging things that are essential, and that everybody's ideas can be put on the table and we can talk about them. So I think that, and especially in early companies, you need this sort of like, people need to come into it and trust each other. And they need to trust that the ideas are based on reality, not just like an opinion. And the more they get bought in on it because things get challenged and you get good answers, or you run a test, or you check things, or you play it yourself, you do a build and you try it yourself. You start to build like an actual, like I said, compound interest in relationship, compound interest, but also understanding compound interest.
What you're describing is really psychological safety.
Yeah.
Because that's what, like, I've heard different ways psychological safety has been described. I've heard the ones where, like, oh, it's the leadership taking ownership of their mistakes. Like, no, it's not. Like, I guess it is, but it's not really. Like the whole psychological safety in that book or that study that Google presented was exactly this. You're in a team setting, and no matter at what level you are in that team, you can challenge.
Yeah.
And you feel psychologically safe to challenge people who are above you.
Yeah. And it's not about ego or whatever. We're working together to try to figure out how this thing's going to work.
Yeah. And you're describing that, but even though, like, in theory, that sounds totally like, of course, that sounds great. We want to show that type of a psychological safety in your organization. What you essentially noticed is that even through your own example, that was actually negatively affecting not even the psychological safety, but the coherence of that group.
Exactly. You still need coherence.
So ultimate psychological safety destroyed the coherence of the group.
Yeah. And I mean, the fun part
is interesting.
Marco challenged me on challenging people too much.
Yes, exactly. And
it's too much of this.
And so basically, did you then compartmentalize or
compromise or no? But I mean, this is actually, I think, a really good model.
Is that a word? Yeah. Compartmentalize?
No, compartmentalize.
Compartmentalize. That's what now I pronounce it like a Swede.
It's almost like a Finnish word.
Yeah. So that difficult word, compartmentalize.
Yeah.
So meaning in practice. Yes. This is what I'm trying to say. Did you then change the conflict to, this is where we're going to have conflict. These are the people who are part of the conflict. But when we get out of the conflict, like, us three need to be on the same page. And then we bring what we conflicted about, the decision, to this group so they can conflict about. Like, it's a pre-chewed conflict that they can then conflict about.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, or at least bring them some, exactly. So if you want to be all hectic about stuff, that's cool. We'll do it in our forums. But when we're there, make sure that we support them on getting moving forward. I think one of the ways that we've dealt with this, one of the ways we approach this in Magnetic is, when you join the team, just get things done. Don't worry about it too much. You'll be able to challenge and stuff, but challenge based on your doing. So, like, when you join the team, I mean, the more you do in the team, you start to get a flow, you start to build a relationship, you start to interact when you're doing, right? You build a thing, certain checks it, so it looks cool. So if doing is like strong, if you get a good, strong flow of doing, you start to reflect and see things. And then your challenges come from doing, not from theoretical, like, I don't think we should use blue, or because I don't think, I've heard people don't like blue. And you're like, so
Rick Rubin.
Yeah. Yes. Shout out to you, Cotty. Shout out to you, Cotty. That's awesome. It's just in the back of my mind still. It's haunting me forever. But if the challenge comes from your doing, it's a real thing, without like leaking too much. We had a guy that's working with us on what I'll call like, creator relations anyway. And he came in, and I know the guy, so I know he's going to challenge on stuff. And he was like, so I'm just worried if I challenge, I'm going to like set things off balance. And I was like, deliver stuff, and then nobody will be bothered.
Because you're delivering stuff that builds your social capital in this company, and that social capital can be spent on challenging.
Exactly. And it's also not just social capital, which I agree with, but when you do stuff, you start to understand what the Trump company is trying to achieve. And it's not just from like an abstract place, from a concrete place of what we're working on.
Fascinating. What would be your advice for somebody wanting to be David Nelson at their organization?
Ooh.
Or somebody coming into an organization and wanting to be David Nelson, even if they haven't been introduced with a PowerPoint with Tom Cruise.
I mean, I think a good thing to think about is, I know there's a lot of people that leave companies and take down some notes. I've heard people do that a lot. Like, they leave a company and they write down all their notes about what they want to change. I think one of the most valuable things you can do is come to a company, just like you were saying, and listen and take in everything you can. Like, do whatever it is you've been asked to do, and then just like take notes on it and reflect. And what you'll find is, a lot of times, I think you're early on questions like, why is this that important? It doesn't seem like it should be. Later on, you'll start to get nuance around it and you'll understand why people think it's important, but maybe you still don't think it is. But you spend a few months like that and you'll have a coherent way to challenge something. Like a coherent, like, I think this thing would be maybe something we should look at doing differently. So I would say, like, spend a lot of time writing. I mean, get one of these. I use day one, but just write in a journal, empty your mind on stuff. And you start to build an understanding in yourself of something and try to keep it independent. Like, write like, come, on your way home from work or whatever, or like write first thing in the morning before you like log into everything, sit down and
doing meetings.
Yeah, exactly. But like really try to get your brain out of the thing to reflect, because then you come with real impact, which is not like it's again, not abstract, not theoretical, but from what the company's trying to achieve and from your experience of it.
That's a great advice. Of course, people have different, like we're talking about how to come in and drive change in a company. That's a very different, because most of the people who get hired into a company just want to assimilate as soon as possible. The challenge with that is that you lose the outsider's perspective that can help the company to improve. Yeah. And they're like, I'm in a rush to become one of you. What you're saying is like, as you're becoming one of us, have a journal.
Independence,
have a journal. Put in these thoughts. What are you thinking? What are you seeing? Then go back and like, let's say I will talk to you in a month and I want to see how this went. Yeah. We don't need to talk before that. I don't need your first impressions. You write them down. Yeah. Because that first impression will change over time. Yeah. Yeah. And so if we'll have a meeting after that, I'll, make sure to see, I want to talk to you in a month, what everything has happened. You take these notes, certain things that you felt like as a first impression, we could say like, hey, at first I felt like this, but actually it's like that. So I'm not going to talk about it even at all. Yeah. But if I would have talked to you in a week, you would have raised that as a major point. Yeah. But then other things would be a major points. And I've noticed that X, Y, and Z happens. And I think that in order to do this, we could consider doing it that way. Yeah. That is so valuable for a company. And let's say you're hired in this position, or you want to be a Maverick, or you want to drive certain change that you're seeing. You're that type of a person that is very receptive and wants to, be konfliktintresserad. The best way to do that is exactly take the notes. And if let's say you're not having a meeting with the CEO or your director or whatnot, write it down. Write a very actionable list down. Yeah. Please don't make a Bible out of it. Yeah. Please use bullet points. Please use clear examples. Yeah. Write it down, 10 points, 5 points that you felt stood out when you went and what it could be better. Yeah. Send it. I guarantee that 95% of the organizations will say, hey, please come here. Let's have a conversation.
I want to hear,
this is an excellent list. I want to hear more about this to help me to improve the company, because I'm blind to how this operates, or I'm a CEO. People don't tell me these things anymore. I would like to know what I can do against this.
And I mean, if you write a 10-point list or a 5-point list, write it, get up the next morning, look at it.
Oh yeah, please don't write and send.
One of the points you'll be embarrassed.
Yeah.
And be like, ooh.
And take away the typos.
Yeah. And delete it down to 2. If you have to include a third, because it's just half, do it, because 2 you can absorb, and hit with the ones you think matter. Yeah. Prioritize them. And I think it's a good, this is a long time ago when I was at BWin, we'd bought a company called Gioco Digitale. It was, at the time they were just legalizing,
weed.
Online poker in Italy, close. Online poker in Italy. And we'd bought this company that had taken off and they'd done really well. And we had this big poker meeting. And there was a team that had done some marketing work. And people kind of knew that I had a different position on what I thought really mattered. And it kept being proven in this marketing thing worked too. And the team was trying to prove that their work was impactful, which I respect. I mean, it's what you have to do in a scenario. But I didn't think it was the most impactful work. And I didn't think that they weren't real poker players. And I was a real poker player. So I kept thinking this isn't really what matters. And I was probably, anyway, we're sitting in this giant meeting. It's 40 people. And the CEO turns to me. They did this presentation and there's some discussion about it. And he turns to me and says, does anybody have any feedback on this? And I'm like, I'm not throwing my hat in that ring. And then he says to me, David, I'm sure you have thoughts.
This is what I mean.
What are they?
This type of a conflict.
And then I said, none of that really matters. bwin is on the front of Real Madrid and AC Milan, that's 90% of the value. The rest doesn't matter. And I'm sure I'm right, but was it, did it help me? No. Did it change any decision making in the company? No. Would I do it again? No.
So you challenged.
Yeah, I did. And it didn't change anything. And I didn't think about, is this the moment? Am I gonna, all I did was like deflate a group who then went back to fighting that they were right about something. And like the CEO was really he wasn't he had other concerns. It wasn't what he was going to change. So,
why did he then ask your opinion?
Because he wanted, this is the thing. People want to know things. And if you're in that room as a CEO and you look around, you think that dude will give me an alternate point of view. But and I think when I think of both things, a Maverick person now wants to change something. Think about when you offer your dissenting opinion. Wonder, am I going to have the impact that I want? Is this the forum to do it in? And then as a CEO or a leader in an organization, don't just take this nice Maverick person who really wants to give you an outside opinion and put it out there and make it into a political thing. Take them to the side and ask them what they think. Try to understand the perspective.
That's a very good point. When I was saying creating a conflict, that's like creating a conflict in a management team where everybody is a peer.
There's
you would never try to create Netflix has good examples of this, which they, at least in the book where they talk about it. So it's again a book. Could be true. Could be aspiration.
PR,
not even PR, just what they would like to be true.
Or they've built an organization around it on purpose, which is a different thing.
Yeah.
Like if you tell the whole organization these kind of things are going to happen, then it's not politicized. Then it's a function of the company, and everyone comes in expecting it. Which is okay.
That's true. But in any normal organization, like Netflix is an outlier, of course, a very unique culture.
Yep.
But any normal organization, creating conflict. That's a very good addition. Creating conflict among peers, not like, hey, let's bring the new trainee and ask her or him what they think about this current challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That is, I think, one of the arts, and having been on both sides of it, how do you create a conflict in order to move questions forward?
Yeah.
It's a good place to spend time.
Yeah. Yeah. Experimentation book, experimentation group, being a Maverick at an organization. Tell me about your current company, Magma.
So at Magnetic,
sorry.
We can be Magma. We can be Magma if you want us to.
But Magnetic produces Magma.
No, what? It does? Magnetism? Magnets?
No, it does.
It's cool. It's all right.
Okay, please. I was.
No, but we're
Magnetic.
We've got. I am under the opinion. I'll say something controversial, and then you can get mad at me.
Is it
Chris can yell at me.
Political?
No, it's not.
Okay, so then you can say it.
Cool.
We're an apolitical podcast.
There's a wonderful song called "Apolitical Blues" by Little Feat. It came out in the 70s, and I absolutely love it. It's one of the best. Anyway, so we've spent a lot of time around casual games and working on these things, and I think that a lot of the reasons that the mobile game industry, I know there's ATT and IDFA and all that stuff, but I actually think most of the stuff that's been released is uninteresting. And I think when we talk about the growth of a genre, people are like, oh, there's this new genre that's grown a bunch, like
merge games.
Yeah, like merge games. But it's usually a couple titles that have grown.
4?
Yeah, and then that's it. It's usually about a title. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think really what grows things in creative industries is that somebody has a new take on something.
Mm-hmm. Yes, actually, Merge is a bad example because there are many titles grew.
Yeah, Merge is probably the most ground. I think it's actually just like that because it ended up not being a very big breakthrough because it was hard to monetize.
Yeah.
So it meant it was hard to have one breakthrough hit.
Yeah.
Whereas other places Monopoly Go is, was it board game simulation is grown by 385%.
And you're like, or Monopoly Go, and then some other ones kind of declined during that time. Yeah. But yeah, like I usually, in that sense, when we have these graphs of different subgenres, we also have the concentration percentage. that really should show whether this is original thing or not. But at the same time, like, listen, remember Design Home?
Yep.
Who could forget that?
Who could forget?
Yeah.
Yes.
Shout out to EA who took over it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that was a bad joke, but it was it's not at its former glory.
No, it's not. Yep.
But when it felt like this is a genre with only one game.
Yeah.
And then other games came through.
Yeah.
Like Redecor.
Yeah,
is a great
Redecor,
example.
huge,
Came in pretty similar. I was sure when Redecor when I saw the first prototypes and so forth, I was like, there's Design Home and nothing else. And no, I was wrong.
But wasn't it a bit different also? I mean,
it was plus one. Was it
plus one? Like, it felt like the UI structure of it, the way it felt to me was different. I don't remember Design Home well enough to really, because one feels like a game almost, and the other one almost feels like a
decoration app.
Yeah.
Well, they both were kind of. I mean, we're going to details, but yeah, I mean, I would say they're the same audience.
This is what I think is interesting, though. If you take like, Bejeweled Blitz to Candy Crush Saga, there's a lot, Bejeweled Blitz, it's just this, Candy Crush is just the same. But the Saga innovation is a big one, and it changes the way I relate to it. And it can be a change just like that. Or, and the core is also different too. You're playing these different types of games, and these games are designed so they're different. And I think, like, one of the things that I think is a valuable way to a good way to look at how these things happen, like Pokemon Go. Where does Pokemon Go come from? Oh shit. Where does Pokemon Go come from? It doesn't come from nowhere. These guys worked at Google Maps, and then they made like a geocaching game, and then they made Ingress, which we were all playing back in 2013 and like, getting, that was serious. And then Pokemon Go comes as an end to that. So there's a whole bunch of deeper understanding going on, and they bring something fresh into the market. And then sometimes there's just like a change. Like, the change to Saga from like not having sagas was also based on a ton of experimentation, a ton of trying things out on the Facebook platform on Canvas. So I think that really finding a new, like, I don't think there's a lot of that going on right now. A lot of it is quite passive. It's like slightly better than before. And you're winning on like unit economics on stuff. And the winners and losers are like unit economics oriented. And I think that meanwhile, there's huge things changing. When was it last quarter? TikTok took in $1.5 billion in in-app purchases.
Yeah, I know.
And have you tried? You know what it is? It's like giving roses to like live streams.
Yeah, for creators.
1.5 billion. Yeah. So while games and especially casual or hyper casual is like relatively the same as it's been before, the way that people are using, like, what we're doing on our phones is very different.
Yeah.
So I think that there are I think you need to, like, if you want to innovate and make something big, and I think that's also a question, you guys have talked about it a lot recently with like VCs and investing and what kind of company you're starting, but you really need to know, what am I trying to do? Am I trying to build something that's like generational? Then I'm going to I need to take some risks, because I'm not going to get it by just slightly altering something. Do I just want to make a game that's good enough for me and maybe makes $10 million, $20 million? That's okay. You probably shouldn't sell it to
venture capital.
Yeah, a VC and tell them you're going to make $1 billion company, because that's going to be uncomfortable. But like, you really need to think about it. So, I think one of the big things that's pulling down mobile games growth is the lack of interesting new shit. I think most of it is relatively like, a lot of the games look the same. If I took some of the games, let's not mention the one, but the one that you showed me just a little bit ago, if you'd said that launched in 2019, I would have been like, oh, okay. I wouldn't have.
But when I say it's in soft launch and do the launch, you'd be like, it's straight to the mortuary.
Yeah, it won't matter. And it won't matter just because there's nothing at risk in it.
Yeah.
There's nothing in it that I'm like, oh.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that because the market was growing previously 20% on average every year, compound annual growth rate of mobile gaming market, then that means that even products that really did not stand out were still good enough many times, and that created the ability for you to launch certain plus ones, or what you would consider a plus one. But in current scenario or current market where you're trying to battle these incumbents, these main games, and you're launching literally the same game with, let's say you're making a puzzle game, everybody's watching Royal Match, and they launch their version of Royal Match where they even tweaked the levels to be same as in Royal Match. So they are launching the same game, And all they're doing, despite changing the art style and the narrative and whatever, is promoting Royal Match.
Yep.
But with the same thing. And reskins, in my experience, 99% of reskins have never worked. And it actually causes a lot of problems. We still see companies doing reskins. And this, when you're copying other games and doing Me Too games, I'd like them just to be called Me Toos.
Yep.
So these Me Toos, they're just coming in and all they're doing is destroying themselves.
Yeah. But I mean, and that's probably the thing. So I guess you mean that if Cogger's going on because the ad targeting's great and you're really being able to do all, and like more and more people are on their phones and getting ready to pay and stuff like that. So all that stuff is going up and then it flattens. And when that growth flattens, then the just throwing in a clone won't make you a $50 million game anymore. It'll make you a $0 game. And I mean, I'm not sure which. I also think there was too much of that for a long time.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot in the market that just isn't particularly interesting.
It was the whole lean startup mentality. Like I know I've wrote about it in multiple times, or like even had like presentations. I know you showed me the one that I presented recently at were you at RovioCon? No, you weren't at RovioCon.
I don't know. It's gonna have to. Who knows? Maybe I was there.
Maybe you were in the audience. You showed me just recently a photo of me like saying something dumb, which is not very rare. Very rare. It's like you can literally do that every day.
It's a rare card collectible.
But
Mishka
saying dumb shit in front of people, that's something that happens. I'm just pulling the stuff. Yeah, so I talked about the lean startup thing, and the lean startup is of course like every trend is a pendulum swing. That's how I feel. Every single trend. It's not only in management, but it's in art, it's in politics, it's in everything. So the pendulum swing for lean startup, the whole words of pivot and fail fast is part of this sort of a lean startup book that was originally came out in 2008.
Yeah.
And it was the antithesis to the dot-com bubble and the work before that, where companies were sort of building big products in secret, raising a lot of capital, working on something that had no proof of product market fit, and then putting it out the market and then failing miserably and losing all that money. In general, and the approach there was like, no, let's do counter of that, not adjust the strategy, but the whole different thing. We're gonna ship fast, things called MVP, also in that book, minimal viable product. Put it in the market, no traction, forget that shit, and pivot to something else. And when the market is growing rapidly, that might work, but most of the time, you would see companies pivot to Abyss. They would pivot to something that sounds cool. In games, they would be like, oh, we tried to make a puzzle game. Guess what? Puzzle is fucking murderous. We can't compete in this market. We're pivoting to RPG. Or they would say a little bit of a pivot to puzzle RPG, which is, again, as difficult. With crypto in it. Or we pivot to crypto, or we're going to add AI, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that. And most of the times it's a failure. Though the time where pivots, in my opinion, work is you exhaust that option and you essentially have to move to somewhere. But where you move is at least adjacent and uses what you've built. So, for example, where Discord came out is the company was called Hammer and Chisel, but it came out of OpenFeint. So they already built an audience network in a way, or community network, however you want to call it. Then they were like, but we also like MOBAs really a lot. And they're like, well, let's make MOBAs and let's make cats and dogs and rhinos and bulls. And they do this MOBA on touchscreen devices. It doesn't go through. They try and try and try. I played it for a long time in soft launch. And they create a lot of social elements in that MOBA, such as the voice chats and everything. And when they had to pivot away because they could not figure out product market fit, despite going in and trying it for years, then they pivot to Discord because that's what they've been building. They've really focused on the social aspects, and they kind of double down on it. And, decrease the companies. I understand that type of a pivot. But this random things that I've done personally in my career where I just choose a genre because I feel like there's easier to compete despite having no expertise myself, nor expertise in the team, nor anything.
Yeah, but this is insight based, right? This is the thing we were talking about before. What you just described with OpenFeint is they actually had some compound interest in understanding. So they built some in-depth understanding of something. Then they tried to build something that was outside of it. And they realize, wait, the stuff that's actually inside of the interactions, like the social part of this, we get that. That shit works. So that's what we should be doubling down on. And I mean, that's not really like, so, I mean, I think the thing you're not that, it doesn't sound to me like you got a problem with lean startup and pivoting. What you have a problem with is pivoting into an area where you have no insight.
Yeah.
And you think you're doing it because there's a market opportunity, but you don't understand the market opportunity. And if you've just done a bunch of work inside of a company and your basic end of it is, this isn't good, that's really bad.
Yeah.
It needs to be, this isn't good because we were wrong about this.
Yes.
Or like, this didn't matter as much as I thought. And if that happened, then it doesn't need to be a bad fail.
Yeah.
Like for me, a fast fail, it can be fast. I don't slow. Of course, fast, I guess is better than slow if it's a fail, whatever. I don't know. But whichever one has more insight is the one I'm interested in.
Yes.
Because the insight and the understanding, that's going to lead you forward.
Yeah.
That's what matters.
I'll continue that with like the 4 points that I've made in my presentation that you referred to is like in the mature market where we are right now, lean startup doesn't work because of the few reasons. But I said like having this sort of how would I call it? Like measured strategy. I don't know. I don't need to come up like what's the counter of lean? It can't be fat strategy or fat approach.
That's why it's such a good branding, lean, because nobody wants the opposite.
You don't want to be lean. You don't want to be lean and mean. Deliberate. Let's say deliberate.
There, nice.
Starting with the deliberate approach would be where you have a strategy in the beginning, which I know like many companies still are in somewhat because we've lived in this paradigm of lean startup, and because we haven't had an experimentation group where somebody would say, is this the correct answer?
Yeah.
Is MVP to go on this? Like, of course it is, because this is what everybody does. Like, well, that doesn't make it right.
Enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm going to challenge this. My experimentation is I believe that you need to start with a strategy. I know that it's typical not to do that. It's typical not to think about having a clear vision, having a plan, having understanding of what's happening in the market, understanding what the audience wants, understanding what you can have funding for. Like that's not modern, but I believe you need to understand what you build and have a company. Everybody has kind of like a company vision, and then they have goals. Like we want to be X, Y. In the next month, we need to do X, Y, Z's, and so. But there's no like. This is our product strategy. This is what we want to achieve with the strategy. These are the competitors. These are our strengths. This is like really thinking about how you're going to build this, and then saying, hey, during the next 6 months, this is our roadmap. These are the things that we want to build, and then we're going to go to the goals. And by the way, from the roadmap, X, Y, and Z. People think that's super rigid. That's very difficult. We don't want to think so much further. It's not. You can have your roadmaps that are quite short, but at least you're executing against strategy so that it doesn't lead to a situation, as you said, failing fast. Yeah. There's nothing great about failing fast. Like your goal when you're running a company should never be to fail fast.
Yeah, it should be succeed fast.
Exactly. You succeed as fast as possible. And this whole of a notion of like we're just going to throw garbage or spaghetti at the wall and figure out what sticks. But the thing is, like, in a mature market, the MVPs are just not good enough. So you're most likely going to get bad numbers. Yeah. You're not going to invest into figuring out why they're bad numbers. Yes. You're not going to invest into improving them. You're just going to be, oh, shit, I don't want to invest in this anymore. I'm going to move forward. And I think that's a bad one. And then the third one was, like, the focus on user testing, like being so focused on understanding what the users want. That's important, but over-focus is too much, because if you're testing everything with the users, you're not using your creative edge. Yeah. You're not using your gut feeling. You're not doing what you want to do, and you end up creating incremental, or at worst, what we're seeing now at the Me Too products. Oh, it's the same game with a different art style. Dead. Yeah. What else do you want? Like, and I feel that happening, and because you test with the consumers, and they like what they like, and you're going to show them the same game as they're like, yeah, I love this game because it's exactly like the game. No, you don't. You're going to get this, and you're not going to play it. And the final one was what I'm being more and more adamant about is like having growth as a part of the product. Yeah. Because very often, and in current pitches, like this is what VCs always ask is like, how do you going to get this game in the hands of players? Yeah. It's like, well, we're going to build it. We're going to have good KPIs. And then we're going to hire a performance marketing team. They're going to scale it. You're like, okay. I mean, that was definitely true in 2016. Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, what I hear and all that, I mean, I agree with you completely. I mean, and I don't understand why any other model would be acceptable. I don't understand.
There's still plenty of companies that have prototyping teams that they expect to fail fast.
I mean, aiming towards failing fast is obviously not a good idea. The part that I think is interesting in it, what I hear, I mean, I wonder how I'd relate to it. Like if you're going to make the game, and like you said, it's like we're just going to fail fast, and you're like, and you need an A/B tester, you need users to evaluate it, and you can't evaluate it. That means you don't really know you don't know the audience, you don't know who you're making it for. So if you're not playing it, if you can't make gut calls, you don't really know anything about it.
Yeah.
So for instance, if our company failed and I was like, okay, I'm going to make a, I don't know. I've read some manga. I've read, Naruto, and I've read some One Punch, but not a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was like, I'm going to make a manga game with like
because
really
manga is
stuff,
hot.
because it's hot. Yeah. I mean, I think a reasonable question would be like, tell me something you know about manga. And I'm like, I know the arms are behind when they run.
I know it's really hot. The market size is the TAM is 1 billion.
And this is big. And all that's
grown 26% year over year. And you'll give like numbers.
Yes.
Like an executive presentation.
And people will be like, that's sweet.
That's awesome. That's a big market. How big of a market share you think you're going to get from that?
At least 30.
At least 30%? Wow. That's $1 billion company.
Great. It's gonna be great. But this is...
Crunchyroll that.
But your question really, you'd probably ask if you were in the room at the time, be like, tell me what you know about those games out there. And not only do you know the games out there, I mean, I think of like, if you think of like the Beastie Boys, the Beastie Boys were popular when I was younger. It was so crazy because like there was rap going on and they knew all the rap stuff was going on, but they were adding a different thing. They were actually playing some of the instruments and it was a little different, which meant they stuck out. But it wasn't like they didn't know about other rap stuff. I mean, really great musicians, they know about what's out there and they're making this like adjustment that's actually, related to it. Like the great jazz musicians, they understand what the jazz this time is. Bebop comes in, it adds an element that makes it very distinct. It's still jazz, but it's different. And like that, I mean, it wasn't like, Charlie Parker wasn't like, no, I've never listened to jazz. I just, do this. Like, no, not only did he know jazz, he knew country and classical and all this shit.
Yes.
That's why he could make a new genre. And I think that's what you're kind of saying is like, if you're going to make a new genre, like you're going to bust into a new thing, that's cool. Show me you know that shit.
Yeah.
Like you need to know it in and out. Because if you're going to, they talk about this in movie. I mean, we watched The Sixth Sense with our kids, and they hadn't seen it. And like at the end, someone was just like, holy shit. Yeah. And he was just so blown by it. He was like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And it was so cool. You didn't see it coming, and that was a cool twist on the whole, dead ghost genre.
You want to watch it again.
Yeah. You're like, I mean, it was so, because now I want to see what, but like, you have to know, he knew his Alfred Hitchcock. He knew all of his, that's why it worked. Because it's kind of, it's like tipping his hat to some stuff, but with a new vibe to it. So I think if you're looking to break something, like what I feel like you're missing is a deep understanding of what it is you're trying to achieve. And if I have a deep understanding of puzzle games, which like I've spent a lot of time around in my play, shit ton of myself.
Which arguably you do.
If I told you I was going to pivot to an RPG, I think you should be like, so which ones do you play? Like, can you tell me? Yeah. What do you know? No, but I mean, what do you know?
Yeah. I
mean, can you, is there something that's going on in this genre that you think you're going to break and create this new tension, this new thing that's going to happen? Because if you don't, you're going to end up with a blah product. You can't evaluate it yourself. Yeah. And then you're going to A/B test and who knows, and you won't know, you won't know.
100%. And even with the, like, just to finalize, like people would say, well, how about hybrid casual games or hyper casual games? They launch really quickly stuff. They figure out what sticks, what doesn't. Correct. But that's not their business model is not about making games fast. Their business model is about scaling games effectively through marketing. And that's where they are professionals. And that's why they have the right signals. And that's where the real work happens. It's not on the games that most of the times they don't even make themselves.
Yeah.
They're publishing others.
Yeah.
So yes, keep churning that stuff out, put it into our core competence, which is scaling.
Yeah.
And we'll figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a model there. I mean, do you know the disposable soma theory?
No.
You know this? Okay, the reason we get old and shitty and die is because evolution is uninterested. Like we have kids, by the time we're 30 and 40, and after that, there is nothing that's passed down. No, but nothing. How do you pass down a really healthy 70-year-old? Evolution doesn't know about it when you have kids. Evolution can't tell the difference between a healthy 70-year-old and a healthy, or an unhealthy 7-year-old. So basically, once you've had kids, you're just a disposable soma. And it's for evolution. Like you're just kind of useless, and then you kind of, detriment and die. To me, that reminds me of hyper casual.
It's dark.
Yes, it is dark.
Nihilistic view of
It's
life.
not nihilistic. It's just, I mean, we can, next time we can talk about meaning of life questions.
Okay.
This is just biology. Okay, but you could think about this with one of the interesting things with hyper casual. It is kind of like that. So like the hyper casual model is like get someone in, get a bunch of ad views, you know, and make money off it. But you got to make your money quick because it's a disposable. The thing's not going to live. That's not the model for really great puzzle games. No. And I mean, great
retain for a decade.
Yeah, great supercell games. They retain for a long time. So like quick iteration and testing, that's built for this like disposable Soma method. That's not built for like make something that lasts. Make something that lasts. You have to have insight yourself into what matters. What matters to people year 3? Why? You got to understand that at depth. Can't pivot. Can't pivot to RPG from that shit.
No,
you got to know it.
Trust me, I've done that. It does not work. This comes from experience. That looking at the numbers and seeing the market growth doesn't mean that you can grab it. You need to have several things going for you before the expertise being the most important one.
Yeah,
David, it has been a pleasure.
It has.
Every time we have a call, it's very long. So I'm happy that we're able to record this on site.
I feel like I've introduced whispering into your podcast.
I find this a really nice choice. Do you want to have a comedic moment at the end that I wrote here because it reminded me of one thing?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll cut this if this is not funny. So
that was funny.
Back when it was king.com.
Yes.
I was working at a different company. Anyways, my friend got a recruiter call. I'm like, hey, are you interested in king.com? And then talked about it. He was like, yeah. Director of product, king.com. Yeah. It's super interesting. So he, of course, engaged in that recruitment process. It was KINK.com. It turned out pretty quickly that
you're like, do you guys
a different
have puzzle?
type.
You don't have puzzle?
It was a different type of puzzle. But I don't know if that's funny, but I thought it was really funny.
How long?
He got it on the next calls and everything.
No, I was thinking, how long was he there for?
Oh, that king.com. He should have taken that. I mean, that probably took off. I don't know. I haven't followed how that site has evolved over time, but I was introduced to that site through his interview. So yeah, definitely.
That's good.
And we had multiple scenarios how his career could have evolved.
Yes.
He still works at a gaming company, so I assume he did not pursue that.
You should do like Sliding Doors 2, with Gwyneth Paltrow, where one he goes through this interview process and the other one he stays.
It's the type of a role you get to interact with big audiences. The retention is really high. You get to probably create value to the audience, but it's also the type of career choice that doesn't take you back to games.
That can leave you.
It's really hard to come back. You can talk about all the numbers you pulled and the A/B test you ran and how big of a product it was, but I think Casino is the only one where you can move from there.
Casino would take it. I mean,
Casino would be like, yeah, king.com sounds good. How big was the audience?
But that was an actual thing. I mean, back at online poker, you took people from payments from adult video because they figured out video first. They figured out online payments first. So they were at the cutting edge of stuff, and you kept taking in talent that had figured things out.
I think cybersecurity as well as different type of weed companies would be also potential next steps.
Yes.
And fast food, of course.
Good hiring grounds.
So different career path that didn't take off, but anyway, I hope that offered comedic relief.
I think it was good. I can't wait to see where Deconstructor of Fun goes in 2025. Personally, I know a lot of your audience is exciting because it feels like this year you added a lot to the podcast content and there's some depth and there's like new voices in it. And I think that it's really turning into the media empire that it should be. And I'm really excited about 2025.
SPQR. We're a republic.
I think you're just
we are a rebel alliance.
You definitely
We're not an empire.
No. I mean, you're in the the Scipio phase. You're not in the Caesar phase yet. So it's a good
I think I will skip that. That did not end well.
No.
Didn't his friends stab him to death?
Yes, but it
was a good cause.
Augustus. I mean, this is
his adopted son.
I mean, we should probably cut this off, but he was his adopted son, which I think was his nephew or something like that. But the interesting part with that guy, fascinating dude, like his leadership journey is fascinating because he does not say dictator for life. Like basically Caesar takes over.
He comes up with like fake titles
that
are kind of that he's dictator, but he's kind of faking it. He's like,
I'm first. Prince. The word prince comes
first
from
citizen.
princeps. First citizen. Yeah, I'm just first. But we're citizens. We're all the same.
I'm just the first.
We're all
one.
good.
I'm taking the.
Yeah, I like that. There's some story in the Senate. I don't know if it was with him,
Are
but
you
he was like,
saying that I'm a first author?
yeah, you're the first. You are. He's like, not the founder. We're like, no, not the founder.
The first author.
You're just first deconstructor.
Yeah.
You're princeps deconstructorus.
On that note, SPQR, Rome. We ended up in Rome. It wasn't the goal, but David, always a pleasure. We can do these only on site. I would never disrespect you with a Zoom podcast.
Seriously.
Thank you so much for coming through.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you, everybody.
You did it. You made it to the end of the episode. As a fan of the show, it would help us out if you'd subscribe and leave us a review on the podcast service of your choice. Those stars and likes, while a small action on your part, mean a lot to us and help to grow the show. More importantly, are you a member of the Deconstructor of Fun Slack group? If you have 5 years or more of games industry experience, go to deconstructoroffun.com/Slack and apply to join. Join the games industry best professional community filled with peers always willing to lend a hand, or subscribe to our newsletter to get all the latest insights from the Deconstructor of Fun content creators. Thanks for listening.